My family boarded a luxury cruise liner while I sat at the kitchen table, recovering from a heart attack. My husband, Gary, said I was too much of a medical risk to enjoy the trip. He didn't know I controlled the travel insurance policy that was about to cancel his return ticket. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The sound of a zipper tearing around the edge of a suitcase is distinct. It's a harsh, final sound, like a seal breaking. I sat in the wingback chair in the corner of our master bedroom, my hands resting on the armrests to stop them from trembling. It wasn't just the weakness left over from the angioplasty 10 days ago. It was the pure, unadulterated shock vibrating through my nervous system. Gary was folding his linen shirts, the ones I had bought him for our 20th anniversary, and placing them neatly into his hardshell luggage. He didn't look at me. He looked at the shirts. He smoothed the fabric with a care he hadn't shown me in years. "It's just for the best, Sarah," he said, his voice level, reasonable, practically rehearsed. "You heard Dr. Evans, you need low stress. You need quiet. A Caribbean cruise is high energy. It's heat. It's crowds. It's excursions." "It's a vacation, Gary," I whispered. My voice sounded thin, foreign to my own ears. "We planned this for 6 months, since before the incident." "Exactly," he said, finally snapping the suitcase shut and latching it. He stood up, checking his reflection in the vanity mirror, adjusting the collar of his polo. "And the incident changed things. Brenda agrees. She said having to worry about your heart rate every time we go near a buffet or a snorkeling trip it would kill the vibe for the kids, and for me." I felt a sharp, cold spike in my chest, but it wasn't my heart. It was the realization of what he was actually saying. "Brenda agrees," I repeated. "So my sister-in-law is making decisions about my recovery now." "She's just being practical," Gary said, turning to face me. He didn't look guilty. That was the worst part. He looked relieved. "Look, Sarah, we thought we didn't need the burden. You stay here, order in some healthy food, watch your shows. We'll go, take the kids, let them blow off steam. They've been stressed about your health too, you know. It's been hard on them." Hard on them? I had spent 3 days in the ICU wondering if I was going to die, and my recovery was hard on them. "The kids know?" I asked. "James, Jason, Mia, they're okay with leaving me here alone." "They understand that Mom needs rest," Gary said, grabbing the handle of his suitcase. "Don't make this a drama, Sarah. Don't make them feel bad for wanting a break. That's exactly the kind of stress the doctor warned you about." He checked his watch. "Brenda is downstairs with the van. I have to go." He leaned down, pecking me on the forehead. It felt like a dry leaf brushing against my skin. There was no warmth, no affection, just a perfunctory gesture of dismissal. "Rest up," he said. "We'll send photos." I watched him walk out the door. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. I heard the front door open and the boisterous, excited voices of our children James, Jason, Mia greeting Brenda. I heard Brenda's shrill laugh, the sound of luggage being loaded, the slam of a trunk. Then the engine started, and the tires crunched over the gravel of the driveway I paid for, driving the van I paid for, taking my family on a vacation I paid for. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat in the silence of the empty house, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. The betrayal wasn't just that they left. It was the ease with which they discarded me. It was worse than the diagnosis itself. The first 3 hours were the hardest. The house, usually a chaotic symphony of Jason recording videos for his followers, Mia talking loudly on FaceTime, and Gary watching sports at max volume, was now a tomb. I walked to the kitchen, my steps slow and deliberate. I made a cup of herbal tea, staring out the window at the manicured lawn. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Then the phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. Gary had named it Team Fun 2 years ago. I had always hated the name, but but I never said anything. Ping. A photo. It was a selfie taken by Jason. He was holding a tropical drink with a massive pineapple wedge in it, grinning into the camera with his sunglasses on. In the background, on the deck of the ship, were Gary and Brenda. Gary had his arm around his sister, laughing with his head thrown back. Mia was next to them, posing with a peace sign. Jason boarded, VIP lounge is sick, thanks mom, even. If not here lol. Mia, the buffet is huge, wish you could see it. Brenda, don't worry about us, Sarah, I'm making sure Gary relaxes. He's been so tense lately. You just focus on your heart. 3. I stared at the screen. The heart emoji felt like a slap. They were already celebrating. They hadn't even left the port yet, and the party had started. There was no, we miss you, no, it's weird without you. Just a blatant display of joy at their freedom from me. I zoomed in on the photo of Gary. He looked younger, lighter. He was wearing the Tag Heuer watch I had bought him for his birthday last month, a gift that cost more than my first car. He looked like a man without a care in the world. Another ping. Gary, signal might be spotty once we set sail. Don't panic if we don't reply instantly. Just sleep. Just sleep, I said aloud to the empty kitchen. Just disappear. I sat down at the kitchen island, the marble cold under my forearms. I opened my laptop, intending to maybe work a little, even though I was on medical leave. Habits die hard. As a forensic accountant, my brain was wired to look for patterns, to find the discrepancies that others missed. It was how I had built this life. It was how I afforded the tuition for James's medical school, the capital for Jason's failed startups, and Mia's endless stream of designer clothes. I clicked on the bank tab automatically. I looked at the transaction history for the joint account, the one meant for household expenses and the travel budget. Wait. I frowned, adjusting my glasses. I scrolled down. 2 days ago, the day Dr. Evans told me I was discharged but needed bed rest, there was a withdrawal. A large one, $5,000. Cash. I checked the location. A bank branch near Brenda's apartment complex. I scrolled back further. 2 weeks ago, right before my heart attack, another withdrawal, $3,000. I felt that familiar itch in my brain, the one that happened when the numbers didn't add up. Gary didn't use cash. He used the credit cards because he loved the points. He said cash was dirty. So why was he pulling thousands of dollars in cash near his sister's apartment? I looked back at the photo on my phone. Gary and Brenda laughing, the way she leaned into him, possessive and triumphant. We thought we didn't need the burden, he had said. My eyes narrowed. I switched tabs to the sent folder in my email. I was looking for the travel insurance confirmation I had forwarded to Gary weeks ago. I wanted to see the policy details, just to torture myself with what I was missing. I found the email, but then I noticed something else. In the trash folder of my email, which Gary had access to because he claimed he was helping me organize while I was in the hospital, there were deleted notifications. Notifications from our investment broker. Alert, beneficiary change request initiated. My heart gave a thump, but this time it wasn't illness. It was adrenaline. Cold, sharp, survival instinct adrenaline. They had left me here to rot. They thought I was too weak to do anything but sleep and cry. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't just make the money. I tracked it. And they had just left the auditor unsupervised with the books. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand what I gave up for them. I met Gary when I was 24. He was charming, handsome, and full of potential. I was already on the partner track at my firm, billing 80-hour weeks. He was a consultant, which I eventually learned was code for unemployed with opinions. For 28 years, I carried us. When Gary wanted to start a microbrewery, I funded it. It failed. When he wanted to flip houses, I signed the loans. We lost money on every single one. When he decided he just wanted to be a stay-at-home dad, even though the kids were teenagers, I nodded and worked harder. I missed James's soccer finals because I was auditing a Fortune 500 company to pay for his private school. I missed Jason's school plays because I was testifying in court to ensure we could afford the lifestyle they felt entitled to. I broke my back, and apparently my heart, building this safety net for them. And then there was Brenda. Brenda was Gary's older sister, and she was the termite in the foundation of my marriage. She was a real estate agent who hadn't sold a house in 4 years, yet somehow always had new nails and a leased BMW. For years, she whispered in Gary's ear, "Sarah is so controlling with the money, isn't she? Sarah thinks she's better than us because she has that degree. You deserve a wife who isn't married to her laptop, Gary." She played the victim perfectly. She was always the fun aunt, the one who let the kids watch R-rated movies when they were 10, the one who bought them beer when they were 16. She bought their love with charm while I tried to buy their future with security. They loved her for it. They told. Rated me. I clicked open a folder on my laptop labeled Family Trust. I remembered a dinner 6 months ago. Brenda had been over, drinking my wine. She had looked around our living room and said, "You know, Sarah, if anything ever happened to you, Gary would be totally lost. You really should make sure he has full access to everything immediately. Probate is such a nightmare." I had brushed it off. I was healthy. I was invincible. Then came the chest pains, the ambulance, the fear in Gary's eyes, which I now realized wasn't fear for me, but fear of what happens next. I looked at the photo Jason sent again. Brenda was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet. I zoomed in. I recognized that bracelet. It looked exactly like the one I had seen in a catalog I left on the counter 3 weeks ago. The one I told Gary I liked, but was too expensive for us right now given the tuition bills. I checked the credit card statement again. Jewelry Emporium, $4,200. Date, 3 days ago. Gary had bought it for Brenda. Using the card, I paid off every month. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a vacation. This was a coup. Brenda wasn't just the fun aunt tagging along, she was the architect. She had convinced Gary that I was the obstacle to their happiness, the burden dragging them down. She had orchestrated my exclusion so they could test drive a life without me, using my resources to do it. I looked at the empty house. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was clarifying. They thought I was the burden. I picked up my phone. I didn't text them. I didn't call them. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't called in years, but kept for emergencies. Robert Thorne, divorce attorney and asset protection. I also opened a second tab for the cruise line's website. I had the booking number. I had the login. If I was a burden, I was about to become the heaviest anchor they had ever dragged. Robert Thorne picked up on the second ring. He always did. That was why his retainer was exorbitant, and that was why I paid it without flinching. "Sarah," his voice was gravelly, professional, and devoid of pleasantries. "You're supposed to be on medical leave. Don't tell me you're calling about the merger." "I'm not," I said, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the marble island next to my laptop. My fingers were already flying across the keyboard, logging into the master administration portal of our family trust, a portal Gary didn't even know existed because he found two-factor authentication annoying. "I'm calling because I need you to freeze the home equity line of credit immediately. And I need you to tell me the exact legal standing of a medical proxy. If the patient is conscious and competent, but the proxy is acting against her interests." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the faint scratch of a pen on paper. Robert didn't ask why, he asked how much. "The HELOC has a limit of $200,000, Robert said. "Is it being accessed?" "Not yet," I said, watching the screen. "But the joint checking account just dropped by another $500. A shore excursion charge. They're spending faster than I can refresh the page." "Sarah," Robert said, his tone shifting slightly, "where is Gary?" "He's on a cruise," I said, my voice steady, though my hand shook slightly as I reached for my water glass. "With the kids and Brenda. They left me here. They said I was a burden. I see, Robert said. The pen scratching stopped. Do you want the nuclear option or the tactical strike? Tactical, I said. I need to know everything before I blow it up. I need to know what they're planning. Gary mentioned Brenda was helping him organize our finances while I was in the ICU. I need to know what documents he might have signed. I'll pull the county clerk records for any recent filings, Robert said, and I'll put a fraud alert on the credit bureaus. But Sarah, if you cut them off now, they'll come back. Let them, I said, but not before I know why they left. I hung up and went to work. For the next 6 hours, I didn't move from that stool. I wasn't a wife or a mother in those hours. I was a forensic accountant, and my family was the target. I pulled the last 5 years of bank statements. I downloaded the chat logs from the shared cloud account that linked our iMessage history. I accessed the GPS data from the family van's onboard system. The picture that emerged wasn't just unflattering, it was criminal. I started with the consulting business Gary claimed he was running. He told me he had a few small clients, enough to cover his car payments. I traced the deposits. They were sporadic, always in round numbers. $500 here, $1,000 there. Then I traced the withdrawals from our joint savings, the rainy day fund I rarely touched. The pattern was obvious once I overlaid the dates. January 15th, withdrawal $1,000 from savings. January 16th, deposit $950 into GA. Rise business account. He was laundering our own money to make it look like he was employed. He was stealing from our savings to pay himself a salary so he wouldn't feel like a failure. But that was just sad. What I found next was malicious. I searched for Brenda's name in our financial ecosystem. Nothing. Then I searched for transfers to external accounts. I found a recurring payment of $2,500 a month going to BM Management. Gary had told me BM Management was the storage unit fee for his old microbrewery equipment and some legacy costs. I ran the tax ID of BM Management. It wasn't a storage facility. It was an LLC registered to a residential address. Brenda's address. I sat back, the air in the kitchen feeling suddenly thin. For 3 years, Gary had been paying Brenda $2,500 a month. That was nearly $90,000. Why blackmail, guilt, or just pure, unadulterated stupidity? Then I found the email. It was in the trash of Gary's account, dated 2 days before my heart attack. From Brenda, subject, the house. Gary, don't be a wimp, she's sick. The doctor said her heart is weak. If she goes, you get everything, but only if the trust is amended. I found a lawyer who can draft a codicil. We get her to sign it while she's groggy on the meds. Tell her it's for insurance. Once the house is secure, we can sell it. You, me, and the kids can get that place in Florida. No more stress. No more Sarah watching every penny. I read it 3 times. No more Sarah. They weren't just taking a vacation. They were scouting for a life after me. They were waiting for me to die. I looked at the time. It was 7:00 p.m. On the ship, it would be dinner time. They would be at the captain's table. Experience Gary had begged for an extra $400 charge I saw hit the card an hour ago. I wasn't going to wait for them to come home. I was going to ruin their appetite. I set the stage carefully. I moved my laptop to the dining room table, the long, mahogany table I had refinished myself. I turned on the overhead chandelier so the lighting was crisp, unforgiving. I made sure I looked immaculate. I didn't look like the sick, pale woman they left behind. I put on my blazer, did my hair, and applied red lipstick. I initiated a FaceTime call to Gary. It rang for a long time. I knew they had Wi-Fi. I was paying $40 a day for it. Finally, the screen connected. The image was pixelated at first, then resolved into a chaotic, noisy scene. They were indeed at a fancy table. White linens, crystal glasses. Gary was holding a glass of champagne. Brenda was next to him, wearing a sequined dress that looked suspiciously like one missing from my closet. Jason and Mia were distracted, looking at their phones. "Mom," Jason said, looking up. "Whoa, you're awake." Gary fumbled with the phone, propping it up against a centerpiece so the whole table was visible. He looked flushed, happy, drunk. "Sarah," he shouted over the ambient piano music. "We were just toasting you. How are you feeling? Did you get the nap?" "I'm feeling enlightened, Gary," I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the quiet of the empty house. It cut through the noise on their end. "Enlightened, that's great, babe," Gary said, glancing nervously at Brenda. "See, I told you she just needed rest." "You look better," Brenda chimed in, leaning into the frame. The sequins on my dress shimmered. "Less gray." "I was looking through the accounts, Gary," I said. The smile on Gary's face faltered instantly. It was like a light switch had been flipped. The color drained from his cheeks. "Sarah, honey, we're at dinner," he hissed. "Can't this wait? We're trying to have a nice family moment." "I know," I said. "I see the lobster. I see the champagne. I see the dress Brenda is wearing. That's my badly Mishka, isn't it, Brenda?" Brenda stiffened. She pulled a shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Don't be petty, Sarah. It was just hanging there gathering dust. I thought I'd give it some life." "Petty," I repeated. "Like the $2,500 a month going to BM management." The table went silent. Even Jason and Mia looked up now. "What?" Mia asked. "What's BM management?" "Dad," Jason asked, looking at Gary. Gary was sweating now, visibly. "Sarah, stop. You're hallucinating. It's the medication. We can talk about this when." "It's an LLC registered to Brenda's apartment," I continued, my voice hard as steel. $90,000, Gary, over 3 years. You've been funneling our savings to your sister while telling me we couldn't afford to fix the roof, while letting me work 80 hours a week until my heart gave out." "I needed help," Brenda snapped, abandoning the nice aunt act. Her face twisted into a sneer. "I'm family. Family helps family. You have so much, Sarah. You hoard it. You sit on that pile of money like a dragon while Gary has to beg for an allowance." "She's right, Sarah." Gary stammered, trying to regain control but failing miserably. Brenda was in trouble. Real estate is tough. I couldn't just let her lose her condo. I was going to pay it back. "With what?" I asked. "With the money from the house you're planning to sell once I die." That stopped them cold. Gary dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I saw the email, Gary," I said softly. "I saw the draft of the codicil. No more Sarah. That's what you wrote, Brenda. You wanted to trick me into signing away the house while I was recovering from a heart attack." That was just talk," Gary sputtered, his eyes darting around the restaurant, realizing people were staring at their table. "We were just exploring options, in case the worst happened." "Well, the worst has happened," I said, "for you." "What do you mean?" Brenda demanded, standing up. "You can't do anything. We're in the middle of the ocean." "Exactly," I said, "and I control the credit card on file for your onboard account." I picked up the platinum card, the primary card linked to the account, and a pair of heavy sewing scissors. I held them up to the camera. "Sarah, don't," Gary begged. "Sarah, the bill for tonight, it's like $600. We haven't paid it yet." "Snip," I said. I cut the card in half. "And the authorized user cards you're holding," I continued. I tapped a key on my laptop. "Cancelled, as of 10 seconds ago." "Mom, wait," Jason yelled. "My Wi-Fi plan is on that card. I'm uploading a vlog." "Not anymore," I said. "I hope you enjoyed the lobster. Because unless you have about $5,000 in cash in your pockets to cover the current balance of your room charges, security is going to be having a very interesting conversation with you in about 5 minutes." "You witch," Brenda shrieked, lurching toward the phone. "You bitter, selfish witch. You want us to be stranded. You want to humiliate your own children." "No," I said, looking at Jason and Mia, who looked terrified. "I wanted a family. You guys wanted an ATM. The ATM is out of order." I ended the call. The silence after the call was different. It wasn't lonely. It was electric. I knew what would happen next. The panic, the scrambling, the realization that they were trapped on a floating city with zero purchasing power. My phone started blowing up immediately. Gary, missed call Jason, Mom WTF, seriously? My data just cut out. Everyone is looking at us. Mia, Mom, please answer. Aunt Brenda is screaming at the waiter. They're saying we can't leave the table until the bill is settled. I silenced the notifications. I wasn't done. I had cut off the money, but I needed to sever the legal ties. I needed to ensure that when they came back, they couldn't claim spousal rights or tenancy. I went back to the investigation. I needed to know why Brenda needed that money. $90,000 didn't just vanish into lifestyle costs. Not for her. She lived in a rent-controlled unit. I dug into public court records. It took me an hour, but I found it. Brenda wasn't just a failed real estate agent. She was a defendant. 3 years ago, right when the payments from Gary started, Brenda had been sued by a former client. She had taken an earnest money deposit for a house sale and borrowed it. She claimed it was an accident. The court called it fraud. She had been ordered to pay back $40,000 plus legal fees or face jail time. Gary had paid her restitution. He had used my money to keep his sister out of prison. But that wasn't all. I found a second lawsuit, pending. Plaintiff, Golden Years Senior Living. Defendant, Brenda Miller. It was a suit for unpaid fees, for their mother. My mother-in-law, Helen, had been in a facility for 2 years. Gary told me she was staying with a distant cousin in Ohio. He told me she was fine and didn't want visitors. He had lied. She was 10 miles away in a subpar facility, and they were behind on payments. The rage I felt then was different than the anger about the money. This was about humanity. They had parked his own mother in a home, ignored her, lied to me about it, and used the money meant for her care to buy Brenda tennis bracelets and cruises. I scanned the documents, the fraud judgment, the nursing home debt, and the bank transfers. I compiled them into a single PDF file. I titled it The Truth. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Gary. I played it. Sarah, he was crying, actually sobbing. Please, they threatened to lock us out of the cabins. Brenda is going crazy. She's saying you planned this. She's saying you're abusive. The kids are scared. Please just turn the card back on. I'll explain everything. I'll sign whatever you want, just don't leave us here. He sounded broken. For a microsecond, my heart clenched. He was my husband. But then I remembered T. He suitcase zipper, zip. We thought we didn't need the burden. I didn't turn the card on. Instead, I sent the text message. To Gary, Brenda, Jason, Mia. Attached, The Truth, PDF. Sarah, I know about the fraud lawsuit, Brenda. I know you stole from your clients. And Gary, I know your mother isn't in Ohio. I know she's at Golden Years and you're 3 months behind on her bills while you're drinking champagne. I watch the read receipts tick on. Read by Jason, read by Mia, read by Gary. Then the shift happened. Jason texted first. Jason, Dad, is this real? Grandma is here, you said she was traveling. Mia, Aunt Brenda stole money. I could imagine the scene on that ship. The alliance was fracturing. The kids weren't just annoyed about the credit card anymore. They were seeing their father and their cool aunt for what they really were, liars who had lied to them too. Then came the message from Gary. It wasn't begging this time. Gary, Sarah, you've ruined everything. The kids won't look at me. Brenda is locked in the bathroom. Security is escorting us to the purser's office to work out a payment plan, which means I have to sign a confession of debt. You win. Are you happy? I looked at the empty side of the bed, where Gary had slept for 28 years. Sarah, no, Gary, I'm not happy, I'm efficient, and I'm just getting started. I closed the laptop. Phase 2 was the investigation. Phase 3 would be the execution. I had 3 days before the ship docked. 3 days to ensure that when they arrived, they wouldn't be coming home to my house. I picked up the phone and dialed Robert Thorne again. "Robert," I said when he answered, "draft the divorce papers and get an eviction notice ready for Brenda. Also, find out how quickly we can move an elderly woman from a facility into a private in-law suite. I have a guest room opening up." The 3 days they were stuck on that ship were the most productive of my entire life. While Gary, Brenda, and the kids were presumably trapped in a hell of their own making, confined to their cabins, eating basic meals, and unable to purchase so much as a soda without triggering a security alert, I was restructuring the architecture of our existence. I didn't just change the locks, I changed the ecosystem. First, I brought Helen home. I drove to Golden Years Senior Living myself. When I walked into her room, the smell hit me first, stale urine and lemon disinfectant meant to mask it. She was sitting in a wheelchair by a window that looked out at a brick wall, wearing a threadbare sweater I didn't recognize. When she saw me, she didn't speak. She just wept. She told me Gary had visited her once in 6 months, just to have her sign a document she couldn't read. That document, I later discovered, was the authorization for him to become her representative payee for Social Security. He had been stealing his mother's pension to pay for his consulting image. Moving her into the guest suite on the first floor of my house was the first time I felt my heart beat with steady, healthy rhythm since the attack. I hired a private nurse. I filled the fridge with the food she liked. I gave her dignity back. Then I packed. I didn't throw their things on the lawn. That's what an angry wife does. I was a forensic accountant. I itemized. I packed Gary's clothes into clear plastic bins. I labeled them. Items purchased post-2015 joint account. I packed Brenda's stored items from the garage. I labeled them. Property of Brenda Miller, subject to lien. I hired a security detail. 2 off-duty officers, uniformed, standing at the gate. Not to keep people out, but to witness what happened when they tried to get in. The morning of their return was overcast. The gray sky matched the slate of the driveway. I sat on the front porch in the same wingback chair I had been sitting in when Gary left. I had dragged it outside. I had a blanket over my lap and a mug of tea in my hands. I looked calm. Inside, I was a coiled spring. At 10:00 a.m., the airport taxi pulled up. It wasn't the luxury SUV service we usually used. It was a beat-up minivan taxi. They clearly hadn't had the funds for anything else. The doors opened. They looked like refugees from a failed lifestyle. Gary was unshaven, his linen shirt wrinkled and stained. Brenda looked manic, her hair frizzy, her makeup smeared. The kids, Jason and Mia, looked exhausted, their eyes red-rimmed, dragging their suitcases with a sullen, heavy reluctance. They saw the officers at the gate first. The taxi driver hesitated, unwilling to drive past the uniforms. "What is this?" I heard Gary shout as he scrambled out of the cab. He threw cash, the last of what he must have had, at the driver, who sped off, leaving them standing on the sidewalk with their luggage. Gary marched up the driveway, his face a mask of confusion and brewing rage. Brenda was right behind him, heels clicking angrily on the pavement. The kids lingered sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Sarah," Gary yelled, stopping 10 feet from the porch when one of the officers stepped forward, hand resting casually on his belt. "What the hell is going on? Why are there cops? Why are the locks changed? My key didn't work on the gate." I took a sip of tea. The steam curled up into the cool air. "You don't live here, Gary," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet morning it carried perfectly. "Don't live here," he laughed, a desperate, cracking sound. "It's my house. I've lived here for 20 years. You can't just lock me out because you're having a tantrum about a credit card." "Actually," I said, setting the mug down on the side table. "I can, because the deed is in the trust. And as the sole trustee, a status I cemented 3 days ago when I invoked the incapacity clause you so helpfully tried to use against me, I have the right to evict unauthorized tenants. And that's what you are, Gary. A tenant who hasn't paid rent. This is illegal, Brenda screeched, pushing past Gary. She pointed a manicured finger at me. You are illegally withholding property. I have things in that house. My business records, my furniture. Your business records? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You mean the records for BM management, the ones that detail how you laundered $90,000 of my marital assets? Don't worry, Brenda, I didn't throw them away. I gave them to the district attorney. Brenda froze, her mouth snapped shut. Her face went from red to a ghostly, terrifying white. You what? I handed over the file this morning, I said, checking my watch. They were very interested, especially the parts about the wire fraud and the elder abuse. Elder abuse? Gary stepped forward, his aggression melting into panic. Sarah, what are you talking about? Mom, I said simply. Gary flinched as if I'd slapped him. I went to Golden Years, Gary, I continued, my voice dropping to a register of pure, cold disappointment. I saw the room. I saw the sores on her back because they didn't have the staff to turn her. I saw the letters from the collection agency in her drawer. I brought her here. She's inside, watching TV, eating fresh fruit. Warm. Jason and Mia, who had been standing by the suitcases, dropped their bags. Grandma is here? Jason asked, his voice trembling. He looked at his father. Dad, you said she was in Ohio. You said she was happy. She was confusing things, Gary stammered, spinning around to face his son. Jason, listen, it's complicated. The facility it was temporary. You stole her pension, I said, cutting through his lies like a scalpel. I saw the transfers, Gary. You took her Social Security checks and used them to pay the lease on your Audi. That's a lie, Brenda shouted, though her voice lacked conviction now. He was managing her assets. He was managing his ego, I corrected. I stood up then. The blanket fell from my lap. I stood tall, fully recovered, fully in power. Here is how this ends, I said, addressing the group. Gary, Brenda, you are not setting foot in this house again. Your personal effects, the ones I deemed not purchased with stolen funds, are in those bins by the garage. Take them. And us? Mia stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Mom, are you kicking us out too? I looked at my children. They were 24 and 21. They were adults who had been spoiled, yes, but they were also victims of a narrative Brenda and Gary had spun for years. They looked broken. They looked ashamed. No, I said softly. This is your home, but the free ride is over. If you walk through that door, you are done with the team fun dynamic. You get jobs, you help with grandma, you respect the person who pays the bills. If you can do that, you're welcome. If you want to go with your father and Brenda, be my guest. There was a moment of absolute silence. The wind rustled the leaves in the oak tree. Gary looked at the kids. He put on his best tragedy face. Kids, come on, your mother she's not well, we'll go to a hotel, we'll figure this out together, we're a team. Jason looked at his father. He looked at the Audi in the driveway, the symbol of the lies. He looked at Brenda, who was chewing her lip, terrified of the police officers. Then he looked at me. I'm sorry, Mom, Jason whispered. He picked up his suitcase and walked past Gary. He didn't look at him. He walked up the steps, past the officers, and stood next to me on the porch. Mia, Gary pleaded, baby girl. Mia wiped her eyes. You left her, Dad. You left her when she had a heart attack, and you lied about Grandma. She grabbed her bag and followed her brother. Gary and Brenda stood alone on the driveway. They looked small. They looked pathetic. Take the bins, I said, turning back to the door. And Gary, check your email. Robert sent you the divorce papers. You might want to read them before you spend any money on a lawyer. Not that you have any money. I walked inside and closed the door. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The legal dismantling of Gary and Brenda took 6 months, but the outcome was decided in that first week. I didn't just have a good lawyer, I had the receipts. Literally. Gary tried to fight for alimony. He sat across the deposition table, wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him now. He had lost weight from the stress, and tried to argue that he had sacrificed his career to support the family. My lawyer, Robert, didn't even argue. He just slid a binder across the table. Exhibit A through Z, Robert said. Documentation of 20 years of funded ventures, failed businesses, and unauthorized withdrawals. Mr. Miller, according to our forensic analysis, you haven't contributed a net positive dollar to the household since 2004. In fact, you currently owe the marital estate approximately $400,000 in misappropriated funds, including the money siphoned to your sister's shell company. Gary's lawyer, a court-appointed mediator because Gary couldn't afford a shark, leaned over and whispered in his ear. Gary went pale. He settled. He got nothing. No alimony, no house, no pension share. He walked away with his car, which I kindly allowed him to refinance in his own name and his clothes. Brenda wasn't so lucky. The district attorney took the file I prepared and ran with it. It turned out I wasn't the only one she had scammed. I was just the one with the skills to prove it. The BM management scheme unraveled a network of small-time frauds she had been running for years. She was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud and elder abuse regarding Helen's funds. Last I heard, she pleaded down to a lesser charge to avoid prison, but she lost her real estate license and was working shift work at a fulfillment center, living in a studio apartment that cost less than the tennis bracelet she had stolen from me. But the real victory wasn't in their punishment, it was in my home. Life in the house changed. It wasn't the silent tomb it had been, nor was it the chaotic party house of before. It was a home. Jason got a job. It wasn't glamorous, entry-level IT support, but he was good at it. He stopped vlogging and started working. He paid me rent, not much, just enough to feel the weight of it. Mia went back to finish her degree, taking extra classes to graduate early. She spent her evenings sitting with Helen, listening to stories about the past, realizing that family wasn't about who bought you the most expensive drinks, but who showed up when you couldn't walk. And Helen thrived. With proper medication and good food, she gained weight. She laughed. She and I would sit on the porch in the evenings, drinking tea. One evening, about 8 months after the cruise incident, I was sitting in the garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the property. My heart monitor, which I still wore occasionally just to be safe, showed a steady, calm rhythm. Jason came out, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He handed one to me. "Mom," he asked, sitting on the steps. "Yeah." "Dad called me today," he said. He didn't look at me, he looked at the grass. "Oh," I kept my voice neutral. "Yeah, he's living in a shared apartment downtown. He asked if I could lend him $50. Said he was short on groceries." I took a sip of the lemonade. It was tart, cold, refreshing. "What did you say?" I asked. Jason smiled, a small, sad but proud smile. "I told him I didn't have the cash on me," Jason said. "I told him I'm saving up for a deposit on my own place, and I told him maybe he should try budgeting." I laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and loud. Jason laughed too. "Good boy," I said. I looked at the house. It was mine. The life inside it was mine. I had cut the dead weight, and for the first time in decades, I was soaring. They thought I was the burden. They thought they could float away and leave me sinking. But they forgot that I was the ship. And without me, they were just drowning men. I finished my lemonade, stood up, and walked back inside to have dinner with my family. The real one.